If you haven't heard yet, American military officials on Thursday said that they had detected a high-altitude surveillance balloon launched by China. In a quick response on Friday, Chinese officials declared that the floating orb was simply a weather balloon and described its drift into American airspace as caused by a forced maneuver, forces beyond a party's control which cannot be considered a violation. This answer didn't satisfy American diplomats, though, and has led to a lot of political tension. And in a massive response, U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken has postponed a critical diplomatic visit to Beijing this weekend. High-altitude balloons might seem unimpressive compared with satellite imagery, but they actually have several advantages over satellites. They're cheap, they can last for months, they can loiter in one place rather than following the predictable tracks of satellites, and they're surprisingly hard to take down. Previously, all that was negated by one obvious factor: they were at the mercy of wind. But new machine learning techniques now allow balloons to use air currents to steer themselves in set directions, making the technology much more useful. But even if they are a powerful potential surveillance tool, it's odd that Beijing would do something this provocative just before a key US diplomatic trip, especially since China has been pushing to repair relations with the United States post-pandemic. One theory is that it was a possible deliberate move by some anti-US faction within the Chinese military or security state, perhaps in response to being weakened in the recent Chinese push for better relations with Washington. But it's more likely that this was a simple blunder, that an existing surveillance program got detected, or possibly even that the balloon wasn't intended to enter US territory at all. It's very likely that China has been using this technique for a while, and that the United States was aware of it but diplomatically chose not to respond. In fact, at a briefing on Thursday evening, a US Defense Department spokesperson confirmed that such intrusions have actually happened before. So how will China respond? Beijing has said that the balloon is a weather balloon that drifted off course, and that it regrets the unintentional entry. It's also very unlikely that they will switch positions on that. It's hard for Beijing to admit fault publicly, but it's possible that there will be some behind closed doors admission or apology. Either way, it's also easy to see how, from a Chinese perspective, the United States might look hypocritical here. After all, Washington and its allies have routinely used a range of surveillance techniques for decades to closely observe Chinese territory, which very likely includes spy balloons as well, which the Pentagon has been working on since at least 2020. Calling off or postponing Blinken's trip at the last moment could strengthen anti-US hardliners in Chinese leadership, who will read this as a showing that Washington wasn't even serious about trying to rebuild a working relationship. Even those more sympathetic towards the US diplomatic efforts may see this as a sign that Washington is trapped by domestic anti-China politics. So what happens next? Well, this is another example that we are officially in the early days of a second Cold War, and in many ways is eerily similar to the last. Take the 1960 U-2 spy plane incident, in which the United States was caught in an embarrassing lie after the Soviets not only shot down a supposedly undetectable plane, but also captured its pilot. The United States, before the pilot went on TV and admitted what he was truly doing, claimed that the plane had been conducting meteorological work and had accidentally entered Soviet territory. Sound familiar? Some of the consequences may depend on how the balloon is brought down. Balloons like this are surprisingly tough and often need explosive force to destroy. If the United States manages to shoot it down and retrieve surveillance equipment that's obviously for military, not meteorological, this will quickly become more embarrassing for Beijing. But in the end, this is fuel for the strong belief in Congress that China is a major threat to the United States. In fact, one US official just recently said that the US and China will be at war in 2025. If you want to know what he said and why we might actually be going to war, click this link.